One decision can change the entire balance of power, and almost no one notices it when it happens. The moment betrayal enters a relationship, friendship, family, or workplace, most people focus on only one story. They see the person who was hurt. They see the tears, the anger, the disappointment, and the broken trust. From the outside, it looks as if the betrayer walks away with everything while the victim is left carrying the pain. That is why so many people believe betrayal has no real consequences for the one who caused it. But psychology tells a far more complex story. The deepest consequences are rarely immediate, and they almost never appear in the way people expect. They grow quietly beneath the surface, changing thoughts, relationships, confidence, and even identity over time. The greatest consequence is not revenge. It is not winning an argument. It is not proving who was right. The real turning point begins when the person who was betrayed changes in a way the betrayer never expected. That single shift can completely rewrite the emotional balance between two people. So why do some individuals who betray others eventually find themselves haunted by regret while others seem to move on without looking back? Why do some victims spend years trapped by the past while others become stronger, calmer, and almost impossible to hurt again? Why does chasing justice often lead to more pain while letting go can become the most powerful response of all? These questions reveal a side of betrayal that few people ever stop to examine. In this video, you will discover the hidden psychology behind betrayal, why emotional wounds cut so deeply into the human mind, why many betrayers initially believe they escaped every consequence, and why time often reveals a completely different outcome. You will learn how guilt, self-justification, emotional detachment, and personal growth quietly reshape both people long after the betrayal itself is over. More importantly, you will understand the one response that changes everything. Not because it punishes the other person, but because it transforms you. This is the response that restores peace, rebuilds confidence, and takes away the power betrayal once held over your life. Stay with us until the very end, because the final lesson explains why the strongest form of justice is often invisible at first, yet it leaves the deepest and most lasting impact. If you enjoy exploring the hidden psychology behind human behavior, relationships, emotional resilience, and personal transformation, welcome to the channel. Subscribe and join us as we uncover the truths that help you see people and yourself in a completely different way. Betrayal leaves a mark that is very different from ordinary disappointment, because disappointment usually comes from failed expectations, while betrayal comes from broken trust. When life disappoints you, the pain often comes from circumstances. When a person betrays you, the pain comes from someone you believed would protect, respect, or value the connection you shared. That difference changes everything. Trust is one of the strongest emotional foundations the human mind can build. It allows people to feel safe enough to be honest, vulnerable, and emotionally open. The moment that trust is shattered, the brain reacts as though one of its safest places has suddenly become dangerous. This is why betrayal can feel confusing. One part of the mind remembers love, friendship, or loyalty, while another part suddenly sees the same person as the source of deep pain. Holding these two opposite realities at the same time creates emotional conflict that can last for months or even years. Many people wonder why they cannot simply move on. The answer is that the brain is trying to solve a problem that no longer has a satisfying answer. It keeps searching for the missing piece that will make everything make sense. Instead of accepting that someone made a painful choice, it begins examining every memory, every conversation, every small detail. It asks whether there were warning signs that were ignored. It questions whether different words or different actions could have changed the outcome. This constant replay is not a sign of weakness. It is the brain attempting to restore a feeling of safety by understanding what happened. Researchers have found that social rejection and betrayal activate many of the same brain regions involved in physical pain. That is why people often describe heartbreak with physical words. They say it feels crushing, heavy, or unbearable. These are not simply dramatic expressions. The emotional experience creates real changes in how the brain processes distress. This explains why even after the event is over, the body may continue carrying tension, sleeplessness, anxiety, or exhaustion. The mind is trying to protect itself from being hurt again, even when there is no immediate danger. That search for explanations becomes one of the biggest traps after betrayal. People often believe that if they can only discover the perfect reason, the pain will finally disappear. They ask why the other person changed. They wonder why loyalty was not enough. They question whether the relationship was ever real. They replay conversations looking for hidden meanings that were never obvious before. But many betrayals do not happen because of one simple reason. Human behavior is rarely that clear. Sometimes people betray because they are selfish. Sometimes they are afraid. Sometimes they want immediate pleasure without thinking about long-term consequences. Sometimes they avoid difficult conversations until dishonesty feels easier than honesty. Sometimes they convince themselves that their actions are justified because admitting the truth would force them to face uncomfortable emotions. The painful reality is that even if every answer were placed in front of the victim, complete peace might still not come. Knowing why someone caused pain does not erase the pain itself. This is why healing begins to change direction only when a different question replaces the old one. Instead of asking, why did they do this? The stronger question becomes, what do I do now? That shift may sound small, but psychologically it changes everything. The first question keeps emotional control tied to the betrayer because every answer depends on their choices, their thoughts, and their motives. The second question returns control to the person who was hurt. It focuses on recovery instead of explanation. It begins rebuilding a future instead of endlessly investigating the past. At this stage, many people believe revenge is the answer. It feels fair because betrayal seems to demand balance. The emotional mind wants the other person to experience the same pain they caused. It hopes that if they suffer enough, justice will finally exist. Movies, stories, and even everyday conversations often reinforce this idea. They suggest that watching a betrayer lose everything will bring satisfaction. Yet psychology repeatedly shows that revenge rarely provides lasting emotional relief. For a brief moment, it may create excitement or a sense of victory, but those feelings fade quickly because revenge does not repair broken trust or restore inner peace. Instead, it often keeps emotional attention fixed on the person who caused the pain. The victim remains connected to the betrayal instead of moving beyond it. This is why the healthiest recovery usually looks much quieter than people expect. It is not dramatic. It does not require public victories or perfect closure. It begins with rebuilding confidence, setting healthier boundaries, and refusing to let one painful experience define every future relationship. While the betrayed person is struggling with emotional questions, the betrayer often appears surprisingly calm. This creates another painful mystery. It can seem as though they escaped every consequence without paying any price at all. Many people look at social media, mutual friends, or public appearances and conclude that the betrayer is happier than ever. But first impressions rarely reveal the full psychological picture. Human beings are remarkably skilled at protecting their self-image. Very few people wake up believing they are the villain in their own story. Instead, the mind naturally searches for explanations that reduce guilt. This process is known as self-justification. Rather than admitting that they knowingly caused harm, many betrayers begin telling themselves stories that make their actions seem reasonable. They may convince themselves that the relationship was already broken, that the other person deserved it, that everyone would have made the same decision, or that they simply followed their feelings. These explanations reduce emotional discomfort because accepting full responsibility would threaten the image they have of themselves. Rationalization works in a similar way. Instead of facing the emotional weight of betrayal, people create logical arguments that make their behavior appear acceptable. They focus on mistakes the other person made while ignoring their own choices. They exaggerate problems from the past to make present actions feel justified. They remember only the moments that support their decision while quietly forgetting everything that contradicts it. This selective thinking allows temporary emotional relief, but it does not erase reality. Conflicting beliefs often remain. A person may believe they are kind while also knowing they caused unnecessary pain. They may believe they value honesty while remembering the lies they told. Holding these opposite beliefs creates what psychologists call cognitive dissonance. The mind dislikes contradictions because they create psychological tension. To reduce this discomfort, people either change their behavior, or change the story they tell themselves. Many choose the second option because it feels easier in the moment. This is one reason betrayers can appear unusually confident immediately after their actions. The emotional relief they experience comes from escaping conflict, avoiding difficult conversations, or finally making a decision they delayed for a long time. They mistake relief for happiness. Relief simply means a burden feels lighter for now. Happiness is much deeper and more stable. The difference often becomes clear only with time. As life moves forward, situations begin testing the stories they created about themselves. New relationships require trust. New friendships require honesty. New opportunities depend on reputation. The same habits that allowed one betrayal often create new problems if they remain unchanged. The temporary comfort of self-justification slowly begins colliding with reality. Consequences rarely arrive in dramatic ways. They usually grow quietly through small moments that seem unrelated at first. Trust becomes harder to earn because people sense inconsistency. Friends become cautious without fully explaining why. Future partners hesitate to become emotionally vulnerable. Even when others know nothing about the betrayal, the betrayer may still carry subtle fear that the truth could eventually surface. This fear changes behavior. It encourages emotional distance, secrecy, and constant self-protection. Instead of enjoying genuine closeness, the person becomes busy managing appearances. Dishonesty requires memory, caution, and emotional effort because every hidden truth creates another detail that must be protected. Over time, maintaining these hidden realities becomes mentally exhausting. Another hidden consequence is reputation, which rarely changes overnight. Reputation grows through repeated actions, not isolated moments. A single betrayal may stay hidden for years, but behavior has a way of repeating itself when deeper patterns remain unaddressed. People who consistently choose convenience over honesty often reveal the same pattern in different situations. Friends notice promises that are not kept. Colleagues notice shifting loyalty. Family members notice inconsistencies. Little by little, confidence in that person's character begins to weaken. Sometimes nobody openly confronts them. Instead, invitations become fewer, responsibilities become smaller, and emotional closeness slowly disappears. These quiet losses often hurt more than public criticism because they happen without clear explanations. Every betrayal changes both people involved, although not in identical ways. The betrayed person learns painful lessons about trust, vulnerability, and boundaries. The betrayer also changes, whether they recognize it or not. Each dishonest decision shapes future habits. Each ignored feeling of guilt becomes easier to ignore the next time. Each rationalization strengthens a pattern of avoiding responsibility. Yet beneath these habits, another cost quietly develops. The ability to experience deep, secure relationships often depends on honesty, accountability, and emotional safety. When those qualities weaken, meaningful connection becomes harder to build. Many people eventually realize they lost far more than they gained, but by then the opportunity to repair what was broken may no longer exist. The most significant consequences often remain invisible during the beginning because they do not arrive as sudden punishment. They unfold gradually through changed relationships, altered identities, and the silent weight of choices that continue shaping the future. Long after the betrayal itself has faded from everyday conversation. After betrayal, the first battle is rarely with the other person. It begins inside the mind. The pain creates an overwhelming need to fix what has been broken, and that need often pushes people toward reactions that feel natural but quietly make the suffering last much longer. One of the most common reactions is begging, not always for the relationship itself, but for honesty, for explanations, for one more conversation, or for one final chance to be understood. The betrayed person hopes that if the other person finally admits the truth, apologizes sincerely, or recognizes the damage they caused, the pain will begin to disappear. This hope is understandable because human beings naturally search for emotional completion after painful experiences. The mind dislikes unfinished stories. It wants clear endings, satisfying answers, and a sense that justice has been restored. But betrayal rarely provides any of those things. Many betrayers avoid uncomfortable conversations because facing the consequences would require them to confront guilt, responsibility, or shame. As a result, the person who was hurt often keeps waiting for a conversation that never truly arrives. Weeks become months, months become years. Emotional energy continues flowing towards someone who has already moved in a different direction. Another common mistake is chasing closure as though it is something another person can give. Closure is often misunderstood. Many people believe it arrives through the perfect explanation or the perfect apology. They believe there is one final conversation that will suddenly make everything clear. But even when explanations are given, they are rarely satisfying because emotional pain is not solved by information alone. A person may understand exactly why the betrayal happened and still feel deeply wounded. Knowing the reason does not erase the broken trust. It does not restore the lost time. It does not rebuild the version of the relationship that existed before. This is why so many people leave difficult conversations feeling just as empty as they did before. They expected answers to heal emotions, but healing requires much more than understanding. It requires accepting that some questions will never receive answers that feel good enough. Many people also begin trying to prove their worth after betrayal. This reaction is often invisible because it hides behind self-improvement. On the surface, improving yourself sounds healthy, but motivation matters. Some people work harder, become more successful, change their appearance, or accomplish impressive goals because they secretly hope the betrayer will notice. They want the other person to realize what they lost. Every achievement becomes connected to one audience instead of personal growth. Instead of building a new life for themselves, they continue living in reaction to someone else's decision. Their happiness becomes dependent on whether the betrayer regrets leaving, feels jealous, or reaches out again. This creates an invisible emotional chain. Although the relationship may be over, emotional control still belongs to the other person because every success is measured by their possible reaction instead of personal fulfillment. Then there is revenge. Few emotions feel stronger than the desire to make someone experience the same pain they caused. The mind believes fairness requires equal suffering. It imagines that watching the betrayer struggle will finally restore balance. But revenge creates a strange psychological trap. It keeps attention focused on the past instead of the future. Every plan, every thought, and every emotional investment continues revolving around the person who caused the original wound. Instead of becoming emotionally free, the betrayed person remains deeply connected through anger. Anger can feel powerful because it creates energy and purpose, but when it lasts too long, it quietly controls decisions, relationships, and peace of mind. The betrayer may no longer be physically present, yet they continue occupying emotional space every single day. Another painful habit is becoming obsessed with fairness. The mind constantly compares outcomes. It notices that one person seems happy while the other is still hurting. It questions why good people suffer while dishonest people appear to succeed. This search for fairness becomes exhausting because life rarely distributes consequences on the schedule people expect. Some consequences appear immediately, others take years. Some remain invisible to everyone except the person experiencing them. When someone becomes consumed by fairness, they unknowingly place their emotional recovery on hold until the world finally feels balanced. But life does not always provide visible justice. Waiting for perfect fairness often means waiting forever. During that time, precious months and years continue passing while emotional wounds remain open. All of these reactions share one hidden problem. They leave emotional control in the hands of the betrayer. Every unanswered message, every imagined conversation, every hope for regret, every attempt to prove worth, and every dream of revenge keeps asking the same silent question. What will they think? What will they do? How will they react? The focus remains fixed on another person's choices. This is why recovery feels impossible for so many people. They believe they are trying to heal, but much of their emotional energy is still invested in changing someone who may never change at all. The greatest shift begins when attention slowly turns in another direction. It happens when the question is no longer how do I make them understand, but how do I rebuild my own life. At first, this change feels uncomfortable because letting go often feels like giving up. Many people fear that moving forward means pretending the betrayal never happened or allowing the other person to escape responsibility. In reality, letting go is neither forgiveness nor approval. It is the decision to stop allowing another another person's actions to control your emotional future. This is where the real transformation quietly begins. One day you stop chasing, not because you suddenly stop caring, but because you finally understand that chasing cannot create love, loyalty, or honesty. Relationships built through pressure are never secure. Respect cannot be forced. Trust cannot be demanded. The energy once spent trying to pull someone back begins flowing toward rebuilding yourself instead. This change may not look dramatic from the outside, but inside it changes everything. The endless conversations inside your mind become shorter. The need to explain yourself becomes weaker. The desire to monitor their life slowly disappears. Little by little, emotional freedom replaces emotional dependence. Accepting reality becomes another powerful turning point. Acceptance is often misunderstood as surrender, but it is actually the beginning of clarity. It means recognizing that the past cannot be rewritten, no matter how deeply you wish it could. It means accepting that another person's choices belong to while your future belongs to you. Once this truth settles in, energy that was trapped in resistance becomes available for growth. Instead of asking how life should have been, you begin asking what life can become from this moment forward. As healing continues, rebuilding yourself becomes less about proving something and more about discovering who you are without constant emotional fear. Confidence starts returning in quiet ways. You trust your own judgment again. You stop apologizing for having boundaries. You become more selective about the people you allow into your life. You recognize warning signs that once seemed invisible. Pain gradually becomes experience instead of identity. The betrayal remains part of your story, but it no longer defines every chapter that follows. Healthy boundaries also begin changing your relationships. Before betrayal, many people believe love means endless patience, endless understanding, and endless second chances. After healing, they realize that healthy love also requires mutual respect, honesty, and accountability. Boundaries are no longer viewed as punishment. They become protection. Instead of building walls around the heart, they become doors that open only for people who consistently demonstrate trustworthiness. This creates emotional safety without requiring constant fear or suspicion. Perhaps the most surprising transformation happens when you find peace without receiving the apology you once believed you needed. At first, this seems impossible because the mind expects healing to arrive from the person who caused the wound. Yet, countless people eventually discover that peace grows from their own decisions rather than someone else's. Words. The apology may never come. If it does come, it may arrive years too late or fail to change anything at all. By then, your emotional recovery no longer depends on it. The silence that once felt unbearable becomes ordinary. The unanswered questions lose their urgency. The need for recognition fades because your healing is no longer waiting for permission. This is also why indifference often carries greater psychological weight than revenge. Revenge announces that the wound is still controlling you. Indifference quietly reveals that it no longer does. This does not mean becoming cold, uncaring, or emotionally empty. It means reaching a place where another person's choices no longer decide your happiness. The emotional dynamic shifts completely because the betrayer can no longer influence your peace through attention, absence, approval, or rejection. The power that once belonged to them returns to where it always should have been. As confidence replaces insecurity, emotional independence naturally grows beside it. You no longer measure your value by whether someone stayed or left. Self-respect becomes stronger than the desire for acceptance. Validation is no longer something you constantly seek from people who fail to appreciate your worth. Instead, your actions begin speaking for themselves. You become calmer because you are no longer trying to convince everyone of your value. You become stronger because your identity is no longer built on another person's opinion. Genuine healing is never about creating enough success to make someone regret hurting you. It is about becoming the kind of person whose peace, confidence, and future are connected to someone who chose to walk